Unlikely Lent, Extraordinary People of the Easter Story by Rachel Billups. This is Chapter 4, Unlikely Companionship, pages 63 through 74. Chapter 4, Unlikely Companionship, Simon of Cyrene. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. Luke chapter 23, verse 26. Sometimes life hands us an unlikely but steady companion. We did not ask for it. We did not go looking for it. This companion discovers us along life's journey. And much like Simon of Cyrene, we did not choose it. It chose us. I imagine many of us have received that fateful phone call, the one we did not expect to receive. For me, the call and the space were very unusual. It is not every day that a venture capitalist maximizes a warehouse for creative new ventures, but Houston, Texas was the exception. I was eagerly gathered with nearly 100 church leaders and pastors with a collective passion for digital discipleship. These futurists deeply love Jesus and wonder how new digital methods could possibly connect real people to real people. And perhaps that real connection could ultimately lead people to faith in Jesus. Although I'm sure the presenters for the day were inspiring, I had to step out for an important phone call from my younger sister Julie. At first, I merely walked the concrete floors. Each step echoed against the adjacent walls, and the longer I walked, the more intentional I became with where I was stepping. The space was massive. The construction was fresh and new, but the sheer volume of concrete communicated an industrial feel. The atmosphere was cool, but not warm. After passing people in office spaces, I attempted to find some semblance of quiet in the food court, but with no such luck. Desperate for privacy, I made my way up to the garden on the roof. The view was majestic, and any other moment I could have experienced the awe and wonder. But that day, I simply needed a place to listen unseen. Julie had me on speakerphone as she, my parents, and I talked with an oncologist at the James Cancer Research Hospital. The James is in Columbus, one of the best in the state, and we knew it was my mom's best shot at effective treatment. Her oncologist explained in detail my mom's path forward. The call was not brief. The doctor was gentle and kind, but she did not sugarcoat the situation. Pancreatic cancer does not have a high survival rate, she stated. Those words felt like 1,000 pounds of concrete on my chest. We already knew that my mom's tumor was in a precarious position, and the best shot of extending her life was to have something called a Whipple procedure to remove it. The surgery was not a guarantee the cancer would be eradicated, but it could potentially lengthen my mother's life. By now, I was sitting in a small space that housed the building elevator, tucked away under the corner of the roof. And although I could hear a handful of people walking on and off the elevator, no one person could see or hear me, for which I was grateful. I kept my phone on mute most of the time, not wanting my parents to hear the elevator or my sobs, as I learned more information concerning my mom's condition. I didn't sign up for this. Perhaps you've had a moment when you, too, found yourself in a place of desperation. Tears streaming down your face, whispering to anyone and to no one, I didn't sign up for this. Maybe it was in the sterile silence of a hospital room, the diagnosis settling over you like a fog, suffocating and unshakable. I didn't sign up for this. Maybe your moment was in the bustle of your inbox, staring at an email from your boss that appended everything you thought was secure. We regret to inform you that I didn't sign up for this. Perhaps it was in the stunned stillness of your kitchen, hands wrapped around your coffee mug so tight you imagine you might crush it, The person you had pledged your forever to sighed deeply and said, "I just don't love you anymore." You do not know what to think or even what to say, and yet bubbling in your mind is, "I didn't sign up for this." It's that feeling of dread when your young adult child calls from the police station, sharing through tears that they are in trouble and they need your help, as you grab your keys and you exhale with, "I didn't sign up for this." Or maybe it was under the blinding stadium lights, the weight of your coach's words knocking the breath from your lungs. The doctor has said, "Your playing days are over." And in those moments, your knees hit the ground. The air feels too thick to breathe, and your heart aches with the sting of, "This was never the plan." What do you do then? You did not sign up for this. Life seems to hand us moments that we did not willingly agree to experience. Most days we just want to embrace the good, go with what is comfortable, and avoid the conflict. But sometimes life hands us situations that we simply cannot ignore. And in Luke's Gospel, that certainly rings true for Simon of Cyrene. Cyrene is located in modern-day Shahat, Libya, off the northern coast of the continent of Africa. The trip from Cyrene to Jerusalem is over 850 miles. Making that trip today would be like walking from Columbus, Ohio to the Gulf of Mexico. Even if he traveled by ship, it would have taken him weeks to arrive in Jerusalem. According to the book of Acts, there was a Jewish community in Cyrene, and the group was present when Simon Peter preached his sermon on Pentecost. In a beautiful description of the diversity of pilgrims within Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost, the author described, "And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, 'Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language?' Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, in our own language, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." Acts chapter 2, verses 6 through 11. Very little is known about Simon from Cyrene. Scripture did not describe Simon as a Jew, although one could assume he is in Jerusalem for the celebration of Passover. It is possible that this experience was Simon's first time traveling to Jerusalem. And if it is, could we together imagine his experience? Filled with awe and wonder, the city was more vibrant and chaotic than he had ever imagined. Jerusalem's streets were packed with merchants calling out their wares. They were persistent with desperation in their eyes, some nearly grabbing Simon by the arm on more than one occasion. The scent of roasted lamb and fresh bread filled the air. Simon's stomach began to rumble, his heart nearly pounding out of his chest. It was more chaotic and wonderful than he could have ever imagined. Simon moved carefully through the crowd, his travel-worn feet brushing against the dust of ancient roads. The temple, grand and awe-inspiring, loomed in the distance, its white stone reflecting the midday sun. Were those tears streaming down his face? He had been saving for a lifetime for this pilgrimage, and he was finally here. Jerusalem was the land he had longed to see, what he had journeyed so far to witness. And the temple was a holy place, a sacred space where heaven and earth touched. As Simon made his way among throngs of pilgrims, the noise shifted. Shouts rose from an unseen source. These voices were different. Instead of sounding desperate, they were thick with urgency and anger. Suddenly he noticed Roman soldiers pushing a man forward, his back bent under the weight of a wooden beam. Simon stepped forward to get a closer look. Blood stained the stranger's brow, where a crude crown of thorns dug into his skin. Simon winced, but he could not look away. He watched, transfixed. The man stumbled, collapsing onto the street, his breath ragged. He did not mean to, but Simon cried out. And that was when the soldier noticed him. His response was a reflex. He could not help himself. Was it compassion or merely a plea for human decency? Before Simon could run away, one of the soldiers grabbed him by the arm. Now he went from compassion to absolute terror. "Carry his cross." The words were not a request, but a command. Confused, Simon was trying to attempt to process what the soldier was saying. He was only a visitor, a mere tourist. Simon didn't sign up for this. He quickly looked away from the soldier and into the eyes of the suffering man. Who is this? There was something in those eyes, the pain, the exhaustion, and yet something deeper that felt like love that would not let him go. Simon lingered for a moment, staring at this man's expression that nearly took his breath away. Simon's mind was racing. The questions just kept coming. Who is he? What did he do? Why is he being crucified? But there's no time for answers. The Roman soldiers have a job to do. They are angrily relentless and compel Simon to move forward. Take the cross now. And so, Simon did as he was told. He lifted the rugged wooden beam onto his shoulders. It was heavier than he expected. Its splinters pressed into his skin as he followed the condemned man through a nearly violent crowd. Step by step, he walked with the man, a stranger bound to another's suffering. The walk was painful, not merely because of the weight of the beam, but because he began to understand something very different was happening. This man was no mere religious rebel. Of course, many were condemning the man with their words, but there were others who were following him. Many women, whose faces were struck deep with grief, reached out to touch this criminal. How could so much love and hate coexist in one place? The weight seemed unbearable. But something strange was happening. Although Simon's body ached, his heart and his head stirred. He did not know this man, but he felt that somehow this moment was more than just a forced burden, more than a mere command by a Roman soldier. He did not sign up for this, and yet there was no mistake. This moment was an invitation, a calling into something greater. With very little written about Simon of Cyrene, his full story is left to the imagination. He is only mentioned once in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and not at all in John's Gospel. John did not mention Simon of Cyrene because the Jesus in John's Gospel did not need help to the cross. The author of the Gospel of John emphasizes the divinity of Jesus. Jesus seemed to be in control of the entire situation, even on the cross. And although Matthew and Mark mention Simon, he seemed more willing than forced to carry the cross in those Gospels. Luke, however, described Simon as more of an innocent bystander, a visitor of the city of Jerusalem, minding his own business when he is pulled into the story. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. Can you imagine? You travel to Jerusalem for a holy festival, encountering a community party, and unbeknownst to you, you get caught up in the mad dash of a funeral procession. Jewish rebels were being led outside the city gates. They were directed by the Romans to a high visibility location where everyone could and would observe the crucifixion. The Romans wanted it that way. Crucifixion served as a human billboard to signal this is what happens to those who mess with Rome. I know humans are curious creatures, but most of us avoid such displays of suffering. And in the modern Western world, we have become obsessed with avoiding suffering at all costs, especially suffering that involves death. We shield ourselves from the hard, sanitize the pain for next generations, and work overtime to extend human life. We live in a culture where people use potions and procedures to lengthen their lives, striving to push back aging, pain, and discomfort. From serums to surgery, from experimental gene therapies to extreme fasting regimens, the desire to outwit mortality is ever present. Technology entrepreneur Brian Johnson exemplifies this pursuit. Johnson was has dedicated millions of dollars and countless hours to reversing the effects of aging. His pursuit of the so-called foundation of youth is a full-time job. Johnson subjects himself to rigorous routines, medical interventions, and restrictive diets in the hope of extending his lifespan indefinitely. This man literally wants to live forever. Although Johnson's efforts may seem over the top, I recognize some of my own nighttime routines and exercise regimens are designed to maximize youthfulness and living as long as humanly possible. The desire to somehow defeat death and live forever is real. While advancements in medicine and wellness have improved the quality of life for many, there are many underlying questions. Like, why? Why are we so obsessed with avoiding suffering? Why attempt to conquer mortality? Is it simply human nature to resist pain, or does this relentless pursuit of longevity reveal something deeper? When I think about it long enough, I realize some are afraid of insignificance. Humans tend to want their lives to matter, their time on this terrestrial ball to count. Other people may fear the unknown. Is this all there is? There is quite the mystery concerning what may happen after this life. Even people of faith can have serious spiritual anxiety about what happens next and the realities of heaven. Our resistance to suffering is not just about physical pain. Our resistance extends into our emotional and relational lives as well. Many people avoid hard conversations, choosing silence over the discomfort of addressing conflict. In workplaces, employees would rather quit than confront a toxic boss. In families, long-standing grudges fester because no one wants to risk the vulnerability required for reconciliation. Even in friendships, some people ghost each other instead of enduring an awkward but necessary difficult conversation. Social media has further enabled avoidance. People are enabled to hide behind anonymous screen names to avoid consequence and conflict. Some people curate versions of their lives where only the polished, happy moments are on display, shielding themselves from the messiness of real human connection. We crave ease and comfort, yet in doing so, we often sacrifice depth and authenticity. The avoidance of suffering is also deeply ingrained in our habits of consumption and deep desire to be entertained. We turn to endless distractions, streaming services, video games, alcohol, or social media scrolling. These drugs of choice serve to numb emotional discomfort. Instead of sitting with grief or wrestling with difficult questions, we escape into virtual realities or medicate ourselves with retail therapy, comfort food, and self-help trends that promise quick fixes. I know I have had to tell myself the truth about myself on more than one occasion. I'm quick to get caught up in social media videos and reels. Some videos can be extremely informative, but I start scrolling and before I know it, hours have passed. In what feels like the blink of an eye, I have lost track of time, and a big chunk of my day has vanished. Why do I do it? I want to numb my mind and heart, and am determined to step out of the discomfort of my reality for a moment. We have created a culture where discomfort is not just something to be managed, but something to be eradicated entirely. And yet in numbing our pain, we also numb our capacity for growth. Sometimes we limit our opportunity for resilience. Could it be that by numbing the pain, we shut ourselves off to the unexplored dimensions of being alive? Ironically, history and faith traditions tell us that suffering is often the very experience that refines us. I know I wore out my A Night in Rocktown CD in college. The song that always gave me pause was Jeannie Owens' If You Want Me To. At 3 years old, Jeannie became blind. As she was giving her testimony, she started to recite from James 1, "My brothers and sisters, whenever you face various trials, consider it all joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance complete its work, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking in nothing." James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. My young adult mind could not comprehend how suffering had anything to do with joy. let alone serve as experience for growth. The longer I've been alive, the more I recognize that great creativity is born from struggle. Artists like Frida Kahlo are examples of humans whose work was deeply shaped by personal suffering. After a near-fatal bus accident at age 18, she endured chronic pain, multiple surgeries, and emotional turmoil. Kahlo's life was not easy, smooth, or comfortable, and yet she turned that pain into powerful self-portraits. Her art explores identity, resilience, and suffering. She does not ignore the pain, but rather authentically portrays just how beautifully heroic suffering can be. Paintings such as The Two Fridas, Las dos Fridas, vividly depict her physical and emotional wounds. Hearts outside their chest, these two women are bound together. One expression of Frida highlights her European heritage, while the other draws one to her deep Mexican roots. Frida does not avoid hard conversations. She creates portraits that serve as declarations of strength and survival. Instead of running from suffering, Kahlo embraced suffering as an intrinsic part of her art. She utilized her experience of pain and suffering to express something profoundly human. These messages are found not merely in art and music. Wisdom is forged in hardship. Relationships can be deepened when they withstand trials. And yet sometimes we humans persist in fleeing anything unpleasant, seeking shortcuts to sanitize our existence. But what if we embraced suffering rather than avoided it? Could suffering lead us to a fuller life? What if, like Simon of Cyrene, we could find meaning not in escaping burdens, but in carrying them? Even when some circumstances are dropped upon us unexpectedly. The question is not whether we might avoid suffering. Sometimes we will. Honestly, that too is part of being human. But could we allow suffering to shape our lives and experiences into something more beautiful? I have grown to experience suffering as mystery. I do not crave suffering in some kind of masochistic way, but I do not avoid it. There is something beautifully horrific about experiencing some forms of suffering. And perhaps that's because we do not suffer alone. Beauty is revealed in the gift of one another. There was a certain beauty expressed that day as Simon prevented Jesus from carrying the cross alone. As they led him away, they seized a man. Simon of Cyrene was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves, for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" Luke chapter 23, verses 26 through 31.